Okay, Dad, happy Friday. Today is July 5th. And I guess we'll just start off with always on Friday if you have any good news to report.
Yeah, I not really. I just sorry. I've made really pathetic attempts to come up with good news in the past. I'm gonna
Yeah, I
try
don't
this
think
time.
we're pretty much batting a zero right now for good
Yeah,
news.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm
I,
not going to
I
force it. If there's something is genuinely good, then we'll talk about it.
do, do you
And
think
one of these days.
Yeah, do you think we're getting in our own little bubble of doomsaying and looking for,
Well,
like to me, it seems the world's going crazy, and
yeah,
or am I being crazy by looking
yeah,
at it too much?
right. There's always that risk. I guess just sort of speaking in broad outlines. I mean, what's happening, I find at times terrifying. I mean, to the point where sometimes I lose some sleep just thinking about these things. There is a real risk, even if it's small, a real risk of World War III, and that could, involve an exchange of nuclear missiles. And so, yeah, we ought to be worried. But at the same time, you see just a new a new world being born, right? This multipolar world, and it's I think that is a very positive development. That is a cause for hope, for celebration. It's just that it's going to, the old hegemon is not going to let this happen without a fight, and that's what we're seeing. So it's scary. It's the but yeah, I guess just again, just looking at the broader picture, this isn't all about darkness. It's also about the dawn potentially of a new day.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think that, I might be slipping into my own little bubble, because I think about these topics and talk to you about them all the time. Yesterday I went over to my friend's house for the 4th of July, some guys I hadn't seen in a while, high school buddies, and just, we came in talking to them like, hey, I'm not sure how many more 4th of Julys we're going to be having here in America. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, whoa, maybe, yeah. Like they have no idea, like the world I've been
Yeah,
in,
yeah, right, right,
and,
right.
and then this
Yeah,
morning, I was just talking to my wife, and she's like, I'm a little bit worried you might be turning into a crazy old man. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go talk to the craziest old man I know, which is my dad, to validate my concerns that I'm not crazy. So I feel like I'm turning into this crazy old guy that talks to his crazy old man about. But then I take a step back. And I'm like, no, I'm not crazy. It's the world that's
yeah,
gone crazy. The world
right,
really is going
right, right.
crazy, and
Yeah, I mean,
everybody's just
the fact is, I think everything that we talk about is very solidly grounded, and then there are a lot of people who are leaders in their field who just completely in agreement with what we're saying. I mean, academics, people like John Mearsheimer or Glenn Deason or whatever, Jeffrey Sachs, right? I mean, these are not, we're not just kind of drawing on the so-called crackpot fringe. And then, like a lot of the analysis again, well, predictions of what would happen were made by really establishment scholars and politicians back in the 1990s who were warning about this NATO expansion. People like George Kennan and Jack Matlock, and we're talking about very big names. So it's no, it's not that we are pushing some kind of wild conspiracy theory. In fact, like the whole notion that we would have a war between Russia and Ukraine. That was something that everybody saw as a real risk and talked about openly and said, we got to do things to avoid it back in the 1990s. But now that it's actually happened, and it's happened, really according to the predictions that were made by people like George Kennan, we're not allowed to talk about it, you know, in the mainstream media. So it's really the mainstream media where, there is just this effort to suppress, not conspiracy theories, but just facts, to change history, and to avoid looking at the truth. Again, I think like this whole incident of the debate and the exposure of our president's dementia is just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, right? Again, we've seen it. All kinds of people who got out of the mainstream saw it. It was just really obvious, you know. And then, but it was something that was hidden from people, from mainstream consumers of information. But that's just one thing. There are a lot of things. You know, everything we talk about is actually, again, it's real, it's solid. It's just, that the fact that your friends don't hear about it is that they've been peddled a lot of lies, or they're consuming news that where narratives are very carefully crafted, certain kinds of inconvenient facts are suppressed. That's the world that we live in. That's why we're doing this.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people, it's not that they're consuming the wrong media. It's just, or some maybe it is to some extent. It's just, right. That's what I was saying. A lot of people are just apolitical, and just keep their head. And I think there's a tendency when there's a general feeling, I think, throughout the West that things are wrong, that things aren't going good. Nobody's feeling like America's on top, and there's tons of polls to show that. But the weird thing is that the response from the majority of people isn't to delve deeper to find out why things are wrong. It's just don't talk about it. Let's just focus on daily lives. It doesn't help you to worry about these things. Just let's take care. Which I understand, and that's fine for some people. But I feel like why are people compelled to do that? I mean, you think the right thing, the mature thing would be to investigate it and take a stand, because that's how you can make some real change, instead of just let's just don't talk about it, we ignore it. Right. I think that's the stance that the majority of people take. Yeah. And I'm having pressure to take it myself from my wife. She's like, you're turning into a crazy old man. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there's something to be said for that point of view. It's just that it's a safe way of approaching things. There are a lot of these things, these big issues that we're talking about. Well, we can't do a whole lot about it, right? Let's be honest. And for looking at things in terms of just pure practical personal interest, you say, well, why should I devote any time to the news whatsoever, or any thought to it? I'll think about my job and my family, and that's all. And you can't fault people for doing that. I actually can't. But some of us are just built differently. We're just naturally curious. I think that's part of it. And we can't help but dig into these things. And I think it's important, of course, too, that some of us do, because, as we've been saying, at some point, this is going to come down. It's going to affect the lives of those people that are, like your friends, who have made a point, have just decided to live their lives, live it, within their small worlds, and not think about these bigger issues, not look into it, not try to delve deeply as we do here. But at some point, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. There is going to come a time, and this is something that happens to, all kinds of civilizations. They start to fall. Maybe you heard rumors of the fall. You don't want to hear about. You're running your store or whatever, your business, but at some point, it has a direct impact on you, and these questions actually, which seem so distant and so kind of abstract, become very personal, very real, and you're going to have to make some decisions yourself. Like, do I stay or do I run, or whatever? It could be any of them, many different things. Or now, I'm being forced to take sides. I in a real way, like bullets are starting to fly, and I got to choose which army. And at that point, they're going to have to think about it, and they may appreciate the fact that you've done the thinking for them already. They say, "Hey, let's ask Charlie about this."
Yeah, maybe. I mean, part of the reason that I like to think about these big problems and these big tectonic shifts that are happening in the world now is that I think it will prepare me for what's to come. But the reality is that I don't know if I'm really doing anything different to prepare. I talk, like in terms of like, what should I,
Right.
do I invest in? Do I need to stock up on goods and get a backup generator? Like I sometimes think these thoughts and I'm like, these are crazy thoughts and I don't do it. So I feel like
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
know, but
Right.
at least I have my, my ear to the ground more so. So when
Yeah.
things do start to change, hopefully I'll be able to, just to make adjustments accordingly to in my
Right.
life
Right.
with what's happening.
Well, I'm just the kind of person that this is something that matters. I know it matters deeply to this world, and to future generations, and so I can't but be concerned about it. And
Mm. Well, it's also just it's just fascinating to
yeah,
think about. Even if I
yeah,
don't really make any
right.
adjustments to my life, just be like,
Well,
look,
anybody who's
it's
had an
happening. I
interest
told
in,
you.
yeah, like an interest in history, we are living through history now. This is gonna go back and say, yeah, this is the time when the old order started falling apart. The one that seemed so solid, that was, that lasted, well, you can say for centuries. It's coming to an
Mm.
end, and we're seeing it right now.
Well, when you say for centuries, are you talking about just sort of the Western way of life empire
Well,
or more
yeah, I
the
think it would say
U.S.?
Western dominance. That's right. I mean, obviously we've had, you can say like the scepter of hegemony or dominance has been passed from one nation to another within the West.
Mm.
If you go back, you have the Spaniards, and then the Portuguese, and the Dutch briefly,
Right.
the British, and then
The
the
French.
Americans. But it was all within the West, and the Germans challenged it twice and failed. But it was an intra-Western, struggle. But this time it looks like it may be, it really is looking that that the West's the age of the West, if you want to call it that, is coming to an end.
Mm.
So, I
Fun.
mean, there is this
Good.
larger history, and then there's, more specifically, we're talking about U.S. dominance, which is, you'd have to go back to at least, the end of World War II.
Yeah, so actually it's a pretty short span. I mean, it's kind of, thinking like Joe Biden, I think he was born in 1942. Basically, he was there from like the beginning of of U.S. hegemonic dominance, after World War
Yeah.
II, and he brought it all the way to the end. You got to see
Yeah,
the whole
he's
thing in his
ushering it out,
lifetime.
right? He did a lot.
Yeah,
He's done a lot to
to bring
to
it
see
to
it
the
off the
end.
stage.
Yeah, yeah. What a life.